Okay, I think we can go ahead, Chitra.
Dr. Tanuj Dada is going to be our next speaker. Murli, you did talk very well. I had a signal loss, so I missed some of it.
Oh.
Dr. Tanuj is going to be talking to us on a very critical topic, understanding primary angle closure disease. An amazing personality, he needs no introduction. He's a professor, RP Center, Secretary, International Society of Glaucoma Surgery, Senior Chair, Associate Advisory Board of Directors of Asia Pacific Glaucoma Society, Chief Editor, Journal of Current Practice, and Associate Editor, Journal of Glaucoma. And on all top of this has over 300 index publications to his credit. And I think we are very, very sure to have the right person who is going to explain primary angle closure disease in the best way possible. On to you, Dr. Tanuj.
Thank you, Madam Chitra. So for those of you who are interested in learning about this disease, the All India Ophthalmic Society has published these guidelines for the diagnosis and management of primary angle closure disease. So you can contact the Secretariat and have these guidelines for a detailed overview. Now, why is it important to understand about the angle closure disease? Because it affects nearly 20 million people worldwide. And although the ratio of open angle to angle closure is 1:3, the ratio of blindness is 1:1. So angle closure glaucoma carries threefold excess risk of bilateral visual impairment as compared to primary open angle glaucoma. Now, what exactly do you mean by primary angle closure? So in a normal eye, you have the ciliary body producing aqueous which goes and exits from the trabecular meshwork. So in primary angle closure, you have a physical obstruction of the trabecular meshwork by the iris tissue. So this is known as angle closure. Now, if you see from a gonioscopic point of view, this is an open angle. You can see the trabecular meshwork and behind that the serial spur. And this is an angle closure because the iris has now occluded the area of the trabecular meshwork and closed the flow of aqueous. On the ASOCT, you can see a completely open angle, and here you can see the iris is closing the angle. So this is known as angle closure. So once you put in a gonioscope, this shows an open angle. You can see the iris, the trabecular meshwork, the ciliary body band. It's a wide open angle. And if you see the video at the bottom, none of the angle structures are visible because the iris is obstructing the trabecular meshwork. This is an open angle, and this is what we are dealing with, angle closure. Now, why does angle closure occur? The basic mechanism is that you have a contact between the iris and the trabecular meshwork, reducing the drainage of aqueous. The pathophysiology is basically, majority of the cases, there is a pupillary block mechanisms. However, some cases you might also have a plateau iris in which there is a thickened ciliary body. You get this classical sine wave configuration, or a thick peripheral iris blocking the trabecular meshwork. And in many cases, you may have an increase in the lens thickness or an anteriorly displaced lens, which is now quantified by what is known as the lens vault. The predisposing factors causing angle closure include a shallow anterior chamber, shorter axial length, smaller corneas, a thicker iris, a thicker lens, and an anteriorly placed lens. In addition, you have physiological factors precipitating angle closures such as dim light, near work, stress, the Valsalva maneuver, and it may be induced by mydriatics we use for dilatation in the clinic. The basic pathophysiology is, according to the Mapstone theory, when the iris in dim illumination becomes mid-dilated, the posterior vector of the iris is maximum, and that is what causes the pupillary block mechanism. Now, how to classify patients of angle closure? It is basically classified into 4 broad categories: the angle closure suspects, primary angle closure, glaucoma, and acute attack of angle closure. So what is a primary angle closure suspect? In these patients on gonioscopy, there is evidence of irido-trabecular contact more than 180 degrees. The trabecular meshwork is not visible. However, there is no synechia formation, no rise in intraocular pressure, and there are no disc changes. You put in a gonioscope, you see the trabecular meshwork is not visible. Then you manipulate and you see now the scleral spur has become visible. So this is the occludable angle which is opening upon manipulation. This is a patient who is primary angle closure suspect. Now coming to the second category, that is primary angle closure. In these patients, you have an iridotrabecular contact, but you have now presence of peripheral anterior synechia. And you may or may not have a rise in intraocular pressure. There are no disc changes. This is functional damage. So in primary angle closure, you put in a gonioscope and you will see the iris touching the trabecular meshwork. This is the trabecular meshwork and you have iris at points touching the trabecular meshwork. So this is peripheral anterior synechia or goniosynechia formation. And that is how you classify this patient as having a primary angle closure. As the disease progresses, you have the synechia, a rise in IOP, and now glaucomatous optic neuropathy sets in. So this is known as primary angle closure glaucoma. At this stage, none of the angle structures are visible. The angle is completely closed and you can see a very steep iris configuration. So in summary, you have occludable angles PACS plus synechia PAC plus rising intraocular pressure, which is known as PAC ocular hypertension, plus optic nerve head changes when you label it as primary angle closure glaucoma. What are the important points to be noted in the history and examination? In addition to the symptoms such as colored hair loss, redness, headache, you must take a history of the drug-induced angle closure. Many patients are taking anticholinergic, prostrate medicine, antidepressants, which can cause pupillary dilatation and precipitate angle closure. And you have some drugs such as the topiramate and the astazolamide, which can cause an idiosyncratic reaction. So you must rule out drug-induced angle closure in any patient who presents with symptoms of primary angle closure. Initial signs, you can see the absent the pupillary shadow on the oblique torchlight illumination, absence of the pupillary rough, the von Herrick grading, the iris, the peripheral anterior chamber depth. But the critical sign is that you must do a gonioscopy and document whether the iris is plugging the trabecular meshwork or no. There can be no diagnosis of angle closure without gonioscopy. Do you require to do UBM or ASOCT? Routinely, they are not required. Only if you get an iris cyst formation or a plateau iris configuration are these investigations required, not on a routine basis. What about, is there any role of provocative testing? The answer is no. There is no room of dark room or mydriatic test because these tests have a poor sensitivity. A negative test does not rule out angle closure and you are putting the patient at risk of an acute attack. Now, once you diagnose angle closure disease, what is the treatment? So when you have PAC and PACG, you must do laser iridotomy. But when you have an angle closure suspect, PACS, you do not require iridotomy routinely. However, if the fellow eye has PAC or PACG, if the patient requires repeated dilatation like diabetic patient or is using one of the systemic medications causing pupillary dilatation, if there is a family history of angle closure glaucoma, if there is progressive narrowing on yearly gonioscopy, if the patient cannot come for follow-up and wants an iridotomy, then these are indications when you can go ahead and do iridotomy in primary angle closure suspect and also in one-eyed patients. Now, once you have done the iridotomy, is the story over? No, because after iridotomy, it has been demonstrated that nearly 60% of patients still may have contact between the iris and the trabecular meshwork and the disease may progress. So primary angle closure suspect, nearly 22% of the patients can progress over 5 years and primary angle closure, nearly 1/3 can progress over 5 years. And if you have ocular hypertension, that is the highest risk of progression to glaucomatous optic neuropathy. So what are the objectives of surgical therapy? You have to reduce the intraocular pressure. But in addition, if you can reopen the closed angle and prevent progressive angle closure, that will be very beneficial. So the conventional management, any patient comes with primary angle closure disease, you do a laser iridotomy and then treat as if patient has open angle glaucoma. If the pressure is not controlled, you go ahead and do a trabeculectomy. Trabeculectomy is basically done if the patient has an uncontrolled glaucoma and is not compliant or allergic to medicines. An important point I want to emphasize, if you are pushing the patient towards surgery, you must try pilocarpine in angle closure. Pilocarpine works quite well and you may be able to avoid surgery if you use pilocarpine in these patients. Now, the other modality which is now become very popular is the lens extraction. And why this has become popular? Because it handles all three mechanisms. It relieves the pupillary block, it takes away the lens volume, and also can help with the plateau iris. And the second option that we have is trabeculectomy. And trabeculectomy is a very serious surgery, and you have to be very careful before doing trabeculectomy in a patient angle closure. This is a patient recently referred to us. Angle closure glaucoma trap done. Now you have a shallow AC and an intumescent lens. And doing a cataract surgery in this patient is fraught with complications, and you can get an endothelial corneal decompensation. So when you do a trap, always give preoperative mannitol. There's a higher risk of complications. You must use releasable sutures trap in angle closure glaucoma. And doing a phacoemulsification in these eyes requires an expertise which is not routinely available for a normal phacosurgeon. Now you have done the PI and the pressure is not controlled. So what do? You start medical therapy, including pyrocarpine, and your surgical therapy will depend upon the stage of the disease, patient factors, affordability, accessibility, and what is your own surgical expertise. So you divide the patients into three categories: early glaucoma, moderate glaucoma, severe glaucoma based on the visual field defect of the optic nerve cupping. Early glaucoma, you can go ahead with lens extraction. However, once patient reaches moderate to advanced glaucoma where you require low target pressure, trabeculectomy has to be performed because this sustains the long-term intraocular pressure. What about patient presenting with angle closure glaucoma and cataract? So if there is an early field defect or a cupping of 0.7 or less, you can just do a plain phacoemulsification. Once the patient has a moderate field defect or 0.7 to 0.9 cupping, you can do a first stage phacoemulsification. And if the IOP is not controlled, subsequently do a second stage trabeculectomy. If a patient cannot come for follow-up, you should do a phaco trap. And in patients who present with advanced glaucoma, you must always do a combined surgery in the form of phacotrabeculectomy. Now, what about patients who have got this disease without cataract? This is still a controversial issue, but in this study, you can see phaco versus trap. The IOP reduction is quite good with both procedures, but the complications are much higher with trabeculectomy, and also 1/3 of the patients are going to develop cataract, which is going to require subsequent lens surgery. Should we do the trap first, followed by phaco, or the phaco first, followed by trap? So this is something I want you to be clear on. You should always do the phaco first, followed by trabeculectomy if possible, because cataract surgery can compromise the bleph function and lead to failure. What is the role of a new procedure called goniosynecholysis? So here under the gonioscope, you take away the peripheral interior synechia from the area of the trabecular meshwork. This can be done with the viscoelastic or with the blunt spatula. So is there any role of goniosynecholysis? The answer is no. We found that there is no benefit of adding goniosynecholysis to routine phacoemulsification for angle closure. So to summarize the management of primary angle closure glaucoma, for early cases, a lens extraction alone with a temporal phacoemulsification is sufficient. You cannot do a superior SICS because that area should be available for a subsequent trabeculectomy. So in patients with primary angle closure or early PACG, you can go ahead with lens extraction, but you must monitor the post-op IOP spikes and give medications to control the IOP. If the pressure is not controlled, you can plan for a second stage trabeculectomy. However, once the patient gets a moderate to advanced glaucoma in which the IOP is not controlled on medications, patient cannot come for follow-up or has drug allergy or is a poor patient, you must do a trabeculectomy plus minus a phacotrabeculectomy in these patients. So take-home message on primary angle closure disease: in the history, you must rule out drug-induced angle closure. Gonioscopy is mandatory. Without that, you should not treat a patient. Laser iridotomy is the first step, whatever the stage of ACG. If the pressure is not medically controlled, use pilocarpine. If you are going in for surgery in early glaucoma or PAC, you can try lens extraction and control the pressure with medical therapy. However, once the patient reaches moderate to advanced glaucoma, you must do trabeculectomy, whether you can combine it with cataract surgery, and give preoperative mannitol and must use releasable sutures. So that is in summary the management and take-home message for primary angle closure disease. Thank you very much for your kind attention.